Hello, this is Dr. Anthony Delmont. In this lecture, I'm going to cover the essentials, but I'm not going to go over all the details that are in the text because that's still your responsibility. This course is broken down into two distinct parts, theory and application. The first half of the semester, we're going to develop definitions, learn about the major sales concepts and marketing strategies that drive business. We're going to consider traditional and modern business structures, discuss the sales profession, and get a firm foundation regarding the sales process. In the second section of the course, we're going to dig into the sales presentation itself. Our first lecture is going to provide a deep dive into the sales profession itself. Although we may not consciously recognize it on a regular basis, we're dealing with sales all the time. Your breakfast, your notebook, the clothes you're wearing while you watch this lecture, they're all simple representations of the sales process at work. In fact, you even bought your seat in this class. Throughout this course, I'm going to try and include a slide with jumps to important sections at the front of the slides. It may or may not correspond with the sections in the text, but it may make it easier for you to jump from slide to slide. The first thing we need to do is establish some terms. Some may be familiar to you, some may be easy terms you use in everyday life, but they require a little occasional reevaluation. After we address terms, we're going to talk about what a career in agricultural sales entails, from the lifestyle and the benefits to the types of positions available. There's a range of options that's difficult to generalize, so we'll go through some examples as we go. Once we've spent sufficient time on the sales profession, we're going to preview the sales process that's fundamental to this course, and in fact, it would be important in any sales course, regardless of whether it's agricultural sales, business-to-business sales, or any other. So let's start with a question. How do you view salespeople? Do you have a generally positive view of salespeople? Is it generally negative? Are you unsure? Do you have mixed views? What has your experience taught you? I usually like to have everybody do a poll in the classroom to determine where they stand, but obviously we can't do that in an asynchronous format. So what I typically find is that students have a pretty negative view of the sales profession. And this doesn't just hold for students. This is across the board. Now I've taught this class enough and looked at enough word clouds. I've started to recognize trends toward negative words like pushy, self-interested, dishonest. Is any of that legitimate? Are those real concerns? Why do we have this? Well, usually experience is a good place to start. We tend to remember bad experiences more strongly than good ones. So even if the majority of our purchases go fine, we start to fixate on bad experiences. But we haven't all had more than a few bad experiences compared with the good ones we've had, or the probably far more unmemorable ones. So where do we get these negative connotations? TV, movies. Many people choose a caricature of a dishonest car salesman from some movie or show. For whatever reason, that's always something people bring up in class. While selling itself may not have a negative side, think about Shark Tank, for example. Not a real negative side. The career salesperson definitely gets a bad rap. So if many of us think that salespeople are bad news, why are there so many people in the sales profession? Let's take a step back. Who sells things? Where are things sold? Well, the simple answer is everyone sells things. I'm selling you information right now. Somebody will probably sell me a story later on this semester about how their grandfather's missing parakeet and long ensuing but ultimately unsuccessful search is going to warrant an extension on an assignment deadline. We sell things all the time. It's common. In an interconnected society, we have to do this. But it's not necessarily easy. Everybody has a different level of comfort with selling. So what is sales exactly? Well, sales is a part of marketing, the one that connects people and products. Marketing is a much broader concept. It encompasses all the institutions and activities, the linkages and promotional work, and management strategies that go into connecting a product with people. Sales can move a product, but marketing creates efficiencies. Marketing makes the selling process worthwhile. We could imagine a sales world without marketing if we want to, but it's inefficient. So let's move on to a business context. We typically we buy things in markets, we think about things in markets. It's convenient that way. So this is an example from the textbook that's particularly illuminating. I like using this example of a cobbler because it's definitely not something you need every day, but when you need it, you need it. So I'm not talking about the dessert. I'm talking about a traditional cobbler. This is someone who produces and repairs shoes. If we consider a world without marketing, where the supply chain or how the product gets from the producer to the consumer is singular, so that the producer creates the product alone and sells directly to consumers, then we have a lot of inefficiencies. The barter world's the simplest illustration of this. Let's say the cobbler is hungry. He can only trade his shoes for food. Unfortunately, not all food suppliers are going to want shoes at every moment, so the cobbler has to spend time and energy finding a food supplier who wants his shoes. He may not get the food he wants either, but that's another story. Suppose he can't find any food supplier who wants shoes repaired or new shoes. Well, he needs to find something that the food supplier wants and trade his shoes to get that other product. Let's say the food supplier wants cloth. Well, then the cobbler can go to somebody who makes cloth, trade cloth for shoes, so the cobbler can give the cloth to the food supplier and get food. Well, what if the cloth maker doesn't want shoes? You can easily see how a barter system without any marketing activity aside from sales can get really convoluted really quickly, and it's very inefficient. We can also use this opportunity to talk about opportunity costs. When the cobbler is spending time looking for potential buyers, he could be fixing or creating more shoes instead. Since his time spent most efficiently and effectively at shoe repair, it's costly for him to waste time finding buyers. This is one of the main reasons why we have dedicated salespeople today, to improve market-wide efficiency. Efficiency and opportunity costs are two of the main economic terms that we're going to talk about and probably come back to several times in the course. In addition to making the market run more efficiently, salespeople have many roles. They're responsible for the adoption and proliferation of products and services. Could you imagine how successful iPhone would have been had there been no salespeople or retail outlets pushing the product? Probably not very efficient, probably not very successful. Salespeople also help to increase a company's capacity. As more things are sold, a business can spend money growing and get those economies of scale that are associated with larger production. They also keep businesses solvent, make sure that the market has many opportunities and alternatives available for customers. They connect upstream and downstream supply chain members. We'll talk about that as we go. If you recall how empty grocery stores were during the COVID-19 pandemic, that's indicative of a weak supply chain where those linkages are starting to break down. Marketing, like I said, involves everything that takes a raw product, for example wheat, and brings it from the sale of the seed all the way to the final customer in its final form. So, for example, cereal. Selling involves every step between users, but marketing involves the entire process and all the work that goes in between. We're going to see an illustration of this in a moment. Marketing involves strategy, organization, careful and deliberate management. We're going to discuss the marketing process and tools that involves in subsequent lectures, and we'll talk about organizational structure also in a future lecture. But it should suffice here to say that marketing is complex and involves much more than just selling. So selling is just a small component of marketing. Again, marketing involves strategy, organization, and management, and there are a whole bunch of tools that we'll discuss throughout the next 3 lectures that are used in marketing. All right, so this is a good application to illustrate the difference between marketing and sales, as well as outlining a portion of the agricultural supply chain. We typically think of growers or farmers as sort of the first link in the agricultural supply chain, but remember that farmers rarely supply all their own inputs, so it's much more of a circular diagram when you think about it, because growers or farmers buy their inputs from suppliers who in turn purchase their labor among the people who end up as final consumers of the product. So it's really a big circle, but that's very confusing to talk about and difficult to draw. So we're going to do this as just a regular sort of diagram, the traditional, conventional way. We're going to discuss it real simply here. So treating growers as the initial node in the supply chain, we can see that immediately downstream from them we have either processors at the bottom who process raw products into something that is going to be used by consumers, or we have wholesalers who are going to repackage the product and sell it elsewhere. For the peach sector, about 45% of peaches are sold raw to wholesalers and other folks, and the other 55% is processed into something else. That's just in the US. From there, wholesalers sell to either retailers, to other wholesalers, or directly to customers. Growers can also sell to retailers or customers, but typically wholesalers allow the product to be repackaged, joined together with other growers' products, and then sent off to retailers or grocery stores. And then the grocery stores are sort of a repository where everybody can get peaches from all over the place. Likewise, processors send products to retailers. They could sell directly to customers, but typically they sell to retailers who sell to customers. The thing to notice about this is the agricultural supply chain. All the little blue lines that connect each one of those nodes, so from growers to processors, and from processors or wholesalers to all the other boxes there, those are sellers. So those relate to the activity of salespeople. I mentioned in my notes here to talk about agritourism sites. When growers sell directly to customers, they typically do that at farmers markets and things, or maybe at a farm stand on site. Those are agritourism activities or agritourism sites. All right, this seems like a good enough place to stop. We'll come back and talk about middlemen more in a moment.